What does the future of Uber and Lyft look like? In this video, I'm going to break it down into 3 different categories or 3 different ways Lyft and Uber might change in the future. Number 1, the price. Now, what's interesting about this, as we all know, is when the pandemic happened, the price went up a lot. And everyone thought, oh, well, it's because of the pandemic and everything. And of course, that had an effect on the price. But I bet money, and I've said this in other videos, I bet money Lyft and Uber looked at it as a blessing in disguise because they're like, hey, we were going to raise our prices anyway. And now that we have a good excuse to, because obviously we want to satisfy our investors, now we're going to spike up all the prices. And as we all know, the prices aren't going anywhere. They're going to stay the exact same. And even more unfortunate about that is drivers are getting paid less and less and less. You think, oh, well, Lyft and Uber raised the prices, therefore drivers are getting paid more. No, it is insane to see that most Lyft and Uber drivers don't make even close to what they made before. And I bet that as a result of this, with the price staying as high as it is, drivers are not being satisfied, even though they're doing all these high-paying rides, but they're getting pretty much nothing from Uber and Lyft. I could see Uber and Lyft slowly being used less and less. Now, do I think it will ever completely go away? Of course, no. But like I've said in other videos as well, taxis are making a massive comeback. This all comes down to the price. And as time goes on, I could see that taxis, Ubers, and Lyfts will become more stable or more plateaued, where they're almost all on the same level. Because back in the day, it was just taxis. Then Uber and Lyft, almost out of nowhere, took over the market. It was just Ubers and Lyfts. And now things are settling. I said before, when I was in Austin, Texas, that Uber's coming out with a new feature. We could order a taxi through Uber. So it's kind of like a weird, if you can't beat them, join them type mentality. And this all comes down to the price. And I think with the price not getting any better, and if anything, it's going to keep increasing. I mean, who knows? I can see that being a big determining factor of how Lyft and Uber will change and maybe even be used less in the future. Number 2, a merge. Now this, who knows what's going to happen, right? Like, again, this is all speculation when it comes to this video, but any single time I do a video on this, it's Uber and Lyft. Could it be that in the future, one takes over? Now, I've gone back and forth about this because it's an interesting thing to think. What would it be like if you pulled up your app, whether you're a driver or a rider or both, and it's just Uber or just Lyft, or maybe another company that comes out of nowhere and takes over the rideshare market? Now, I will say this. In order for another company to come out and really take over the market, you have to have a dual transaction at the same time. If you think about it, someone needs to order a Lyft or an Uber, or let's just say this, someone needs to order a car at the exact same time someone else is on the road. As opposed to being a Gatorade, where you put it on the shelf, someone could take it off a day later, a week later, 2 weeks later, whenever that Gatorade expires. When it comes to Lyft and Uber and ride sharing, that needs to happen almost simultaneously. It needs to happen at the exact same time. And when it comes to Lyft and Uber, of course, they're the rulers of the market, but it still has always been Uber and Lyft. Could it be that there could be only one? Now, honestly, I don't know. I think the fact that there's two makes it a very important thing that there's not a monopoly over the ride-sharing industry. Because, and this happens in a lot of other industries, let's say there's one big company that somehow takes over, and of course, this is illegal, but let's say they take over, boom, now they're charging an insane amount for a very simple product or service. Now, like I said, this is illegal for, let's say, there be a big monopoly that starts charging an outrageous amount, but who knows, let's say with Lyft and Uber, let's say one takes over, and now they're charging a bit more, and you're like, shoot, I gotta get to work, I'm at this bar, and I don't want to be driving because I've been drinking. You pull up the app and it's $40 to get home when it normally would be $30. And like most people do, you pull up the apps, you say, okay, is Uber cheaper? Is Lyft cheaper? Whichever's cheapest, I'm gonna take that app. Or as a driver, you pull up both apps and say, okay, I think tonight Uber's paying more. Or actually tonight Lyft has a great bonus. I'm only gonna drive for Lyft. I'm only gonna drive for Uber. For both passengers and drivers, if you had only one app, it's way worse in my opinion, because now you're stuck with that. You can't go to another option that might pay you more as a driver or be cheaper as a passenger. And this is a big thing that I've always been kind of curious about, and I feel like most people as well, because let's be honest, Uber and Lyft really do the same thing. I can use the analogy like Coke and Pepsi, but I feel like although, yeah, Coke and Pepsi are both sodas, they taste different, right? There's some people like Pepsi more, some people like Coke more. With Uber and Lyft, they are truly the same exact thing for the most part in terms of your experience. Could they merge in the future? I honestly don't know, but it would be very interesting to see what would happen if they did or if one took over the other. Number 3, technology. Now, out of all of these, I feel like for most rideshare drivers, this is the most scary and most like Black Mirror, futuristic. I still think we are at least bare minimum 5 years at least, probably closer to 10 or 15 years until this starts becoming an issue, and that is self-driving cars. As technology has been getting better, we can all see these Teslas being insane at self-driving. Lyft and Uber have both kind of simultaneously been working on self-driving cars, talking to companies, trying to figure out, like, okay, as technology gets better, as the future gets closer and closer, it is almost inevitable we will have self-driving cars. And for a lot of human drivers, as weird as it is to say, your job could get taken by a robot and by just a machine that just drives around, picks people up, and drops them off. Now, it is tough to say when that will happen and even how it will happen. Who knows? Because, for example, and I mentioned this in a prior video, I think I did about a year or 2 years ago, saying, one, maybe people like a human, again, weird to say, more than a robot. They're probably going to trust it more. I heard about them when the microwave first came out. A lot of people didn't want to use it because they're like, wait, I hit a button and in a minute my stuff is heated up? No, I'm not trusting it. And I'm not going to lie, even for me, I'm obsessed with technology. I would feel a bit weird if I got into a car without a driver and it just does it on its own. The second thing is the social interaction. There is something that's kind of cool, let's say, especially when I'm traveling. I get into an Uber or Lyft, and I'm like, hey, how long you been living here? Any spots that I have to check out? What are places that only the locals know about? There is that nice social interaction. I know some people like that, some people don't, but that's another thing to consider when it comes to the technology potentially still being pretty far away. However, though, making things full circle to the price, like I said in the beginning of this video, if let's say you pull up Uber, for example, and it says, okay, you can take an Uber X and it's $20, or you can take a self-driving Uber and it's only $15 because they don't have to pay, so to speak, a driver. Well, I could see a lot of people saying, hey, it's cheaper to take a self-driving car. I'm going to start doing that. And now prices start falling in terms of taking a self-driving car. And a lot of people say, hey, why have a human driver when it's $5 or $10 cheaper to have a robot, which is again super weird to say, to have a robot drive me home or bring me wherever. I feel like that is probably the biggest thing that I'm most curious about of how that's going to play out in the future, more than the merge and more than even the price, although that kind of comes into play when it comes to self-driving cars, is that I can see self-driving cars almost without question being cheaper than a human driver. And if people want to save money, and let's be honest, Uber Pool and Lyft Line, which at least at the time this video still hasn't come back from the pandemic, but definitely will come back, people want to save money. It's probably not surprising to anybody, and especially with Ubers and Lyfts being so high now, and they're never going to go back down to the price they were before. If there's an option that's $5 or $10 cheaper or more to take a self-driving car, and another big thing too is the amount of people in it. Now, I don't know, obviously, all the technology and the way it's going to play out, but with a traditional Uber, minus the pandemic aspect, you can have 4 people. You have the driver, plus someone riding next to them, 3 people in back. Could a 5th person get into a regular Uber, meaning will Uber XLs be less requested? Because I feel like for me, like when I typically take an Uber XL or a Lyft XL with friends, it's usually 5. I don't know why, but it's always like that 5th person that you're like, all right, we have 1 too many. Yeah, we're just going to have to get an XL. Or we'll get 2 Ubers, but typically an XL is going to be cheaper. if you could put that fifth person, which would be so weird to do, and you could have them sit in the driver's seat, and they're just like, all right, I guess we're just here sitting and just hanging out, that might actually affect Ubers and Uber XLs. It's tough to say, but I think what's kind of frightening is the future is very close to us. I still think we're far away from self-driving cars, but the big one that I think, especially in the next year or 2 years to come, is the price aspect. Out of all these that I mentioned, I think the price one has already been affecting Lyft and Uber's performance, with less people wanting to take Ubers and Lyfts. The merge, who knows if that will even ever happen, or like if one company takes over another company, and how that even plays out. Who knows if maybe Uber takes over Lyft, but there's still Uber and Lyft, right? Although, it could be a Twitter and Vine situation, where when Twitter bought Vine, they just got rid of it. That could happen with Uber and Lyft. A lot of unanswered questions, but let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think the future of Uber, Lyft, and ride sharing in general will be like?